Aloha, and welcome to Cooper Union, what's happening with human rights around the world. And today it's an honor to welcome two advocates from Oceania. We're able to share one of the most important human rights issues that we must address. Today we'll be looking at protecting LGBTQ plus rights in the Pacific, looking at legal reform to decriminalize gay rights. We're here to amplify the voice of advocates to remove colonial laws that are discriminating against human rights of Leitis and Tonga and other Pacific Island nations. I would like to welcome Joleen, and thank you so much for joining us. But of course, one of the sad reasons why we're getting together is a horrible human rights violation that recently took place. Joleen, could you share with what happened in Tonga in the state of human rights today?
Thank you very much, Joshua. And it's a pleasure to be here in this call today. Of course, would like to thank ThinkTech Hawaii. It's always a great pleasure to be in this program. This will be my second time on ThinkTech Hawaii and enjoying it. However, the situation that happened, or the issue that happened here in Tonga was the late president of the Tonga Leitis Association, which is the only LGBT network here in Tonga, passed away because of a brutal murder that happened to him about 3 weeks ago. And the guy that did it was someone from another island, which we don't really know who he is. I mean, we know of his existence and also his identity, but we don't really know anything about his background or anything. The only thing that we know of with the amount of information that was given by the police, that there was so much anger in him about God and all that. And, and he was out that night to kill. And, and not only that, but he was high intoxicated in meth and ice and, drugs, which didn't help. So Polly happened to be the fourth attempt that night. And Polly just happened to be in the wrong time at the wrong place, and it's sad the way it was done, and we're all deeply affected by it. We're all dramatized. Even the younger ladies, in the kingdom, are totally dramatized by this, because this is the first brutal murder that has ever happened. We've had cases before, but nothing like this. The court case is supposed to be, he's supposed to be appearing at the High Court sometimes on the first week of June, but that's all we know for now.
Yeah, I mean, it was a shock to so many people throughout Oceania because, the world is used to violence happening in many places on many different issues. Of course, today is the commemoration also of George Floyd's passing in the United States. And there's many acts of violence focused on different issues, on race and gender and discrimination. But it was shocking to see that in the kingdom. And maybe we could also share a little bit for people who haven't seen the film Leitis and Waiting, really Poli's personality and some of the most beautiful memories as well, so we can commemorate those positive parts.
Sorry, Josh, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, I was just saying if you could maybe share some of the positive memories, because I remember just how Poli's presence really brightened up the film of Leitis and Waiting, and it was really something where people just fell in love and care so much, and would be so shocked to know that that spirit is now been vanquished by an act of brutality.
Oh, yes, Polly was. I think Polly was one of those people that couldn't care less of what life is all about. He was always the happiest person ever. Personality-wise, you can never fight with poly. You know, that's why we don't understand. If it would happen to one of us that looks like, you know, the naughty one, you know, and people that hate, that always argue with other people, with government and everything, about everybody, you know, I would understand. But Polly is one of those people that is so always vibrant, always smiling. And if you intend to turn around and tell him off or anything, he just turned around and smiled back and start dancing her way out. You know, he couldn't care less what you're saying. You know, but when it comes to work, he was absolutely fantastic. He'll do the task to the very end and to the best. You know, and that's one of my most absolutely loved memory of Polly.
And so to honor Polly, what we're looking at is really trying to change the laws. And maybe, Phylesha, you can share with us some of the work that's happening with Pine Pacifica, Aotearoa Trust, of what exists now in the laws and what can we do to change the conditions on the ground across Oceania.
Aloha whakaalofa to Joshua and Sister Joleen. So Pine Pacifica works towards empowering, uplifting, centering visibility and voice to Pacific MVP5+, LGBTQIA+, rainbow queer peoples living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We work across the domains of education, employment, culture, community, and leadership, debt reduction around financial literacy and debt reduction, and health in particular. And it's about providing navigation, support, and services to individuals to self-determine pathways around goals that they would like to achieve. Fine's other arm, I guess, in our work is to work in solidarity and in unity alongside organizations like the Tonga Leitis Association, Pacific Sexual Gender Diversity Network, ILGA Oceania, to advance addressing punitive laws that currently exist in the Pacific related to homosexuality or sodomy, and basically advocating and lobbying for the removal of these laws, but also requesting for greater protections of Pacific, rainbow, queer, LGBTQI plus peoples in our respective countries in the Pacific that still currently have these laws where they exist. Now, that in a nutshell is kind of what we do in collaboration, and you know the work is great in the terms that what we're trying to advance here is really to and it's unfortunate around Pauli's passing and what had happened to Pauli, because this is a stark reminder of the reality of what we're experiencing within the Pacific region, and also the introduction that we're starting to see. It's been around for a while, but it's starting to get a lot more worse. So not one are we trying to combat dealing with punitive laws, but also the huge influx of drugs into the Pacific region, which are really taking a negative impact on the way in which our communities are impacted or treated as a result of conservative attitudes towards our people, mixed with a combination of drugs, is not a good thing for our community in particular, because we are being targeted, and the result is unfortunately losing a great humanitarian like Pauli.
Thank you so much. And it really goes back also to the colonial times. So you really are bringing up all these issues of the ways of colonization, of Christianity, of those discriminatory laws against LGBTQ. And if we're looking at decriminalizing, what are the main countries that we look at? I believe it's Papua New Guinea, it's Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, Samoa, Cook Islands, Kiribati, and Tonga. Are there any countries that are doing a better job, or are there any model laws that we could look at that we should then look at bringing to those countries to decriminalize? And then spread more greater awareness to advocate for LGBTQ rights in Oceania?
Well, I think what and I think it's because it's contextual. It's based again by people's context within each respective countries, and we can't make comparisons. We can learn from examples from other countries that have removed such laws. But I think what's important, and I think this is a good reminder to our international community who show such solidarity in around decriminalizing homosexuality and other punitive laws in the Pacific region, is we often kind of think about this satellite approach, but what a lot of people are also forgetting about is connecting with the very people on the ground in those countries who are actually trying to do this work, because I think it's a big part of the picture where we get a number of people waving, yay, we were successful, this is what happened, which is absolutely fantastic, but nobody's actually really making the deep, meaningful and purposeful connection with the activists on the ground in the community to support them with the efforts. And I think this is the thing that needs to happen more, because what it connects to is supporting people that have these inherent relationships. They understand the way that their decision makers, legislators, policymakers, leaders, they have those connections and relationships, and that's very key and important to seeing, because I think it's one thing to advocate and use the language of law, but it's another thing to also have strong relational connections and to build allyship in lobbying efforts in the region. So, I mean, I think and I wanted to raise this because I often, when talking to people like Joleen and being involved in knowing their work, I think the Tonga Leitis Association is a prime example. It hasn't got to where it needs to, but I think if you start tracking from the way that they've approached this to where they're at now, to where they're heading, I think is a great example of how people in the Pacific region should be approaching ways to work towards decriminalization of such punitive laws.
Phylesha, absolutely brilliant and beautiful as far as strategy goes, because too often people sort of parachute in and say that they know what's right, but it really has to be a genuine partnership that's rooted in love and respect. And Joleen, what are some of the actions going on now in Tonga of how people could assist, and what's the direction? What's the best way that people can be there in solidarity?
At the moment, we are running consultations, because one of the things that we found when CEDAW came to Tonga, there was not much consultations with the people, and so when they marched against it in 2016, we decided to hold the first national consultation and bring in all the church leaders, all the town officers, district officers, and then also take it to the outer islands, because we've got about 170 islands altogether, and 40 of it is uninhabited, I think.
Yes.
I think 40, yeah. And the rest, we have to travel and go from one island to the other. Yeah, so, that was really not just to educate our people on our issues, but to actually give them the translations of the punitive laws that was done ages ago, because the way they translate the homosexuality law and the Act number 81 on cross-dressing is totally. I don't know who translated that, but I wish I could know who that professor is, and I will tell them with my my whole understanding of what those English words were. I mean, and it's totally away from what the English wording is, because So what we're doing now is continue on the consultations to all the outer islands, all the rural areas, on those punitive laws, and also what we're recommending to change. All right. So, and we have worked our way through not just the community, the district officers, the town officers, and not only that, but we've taken it to the office of the Ministry of Justice, with the Attorney General, also with the assistance of the Chief Justice. We've gone through quite a lot of consultations with that, and now we have been we've been asked by we were asked by the Speaker of the House to translate the Soji language. So with the help of Phylesha, that flew over to Tonga and did the consultation on that, and we were able to translate that into the Tonga language. So that's what has been happening. So we're hoping that we will be able to lobby this year.
And Joshua, can I just add to what Joleen said? I think it's important to understand that language is key here. And we're talking about punitive laws that were written in colonial language, and how they apply in law is one thing, but actually getting communities, people to understand the actual law in their own Indigenous language is key to also, bringing about informing people around the severity of these laws that exist. And I appreciate the fact that this is an approach that I have not really seen in the Pacific, that TLA, the Tonga Leitis Association, are doing, because it is about that. It is about everything they do. What is important to them is that their people understand that it doesn't look like they're adopting Western concepts and different ways of being to their everyday life and Tongan way of being. Because first and foremost, I think what people forget is before we're LGBTQIA+, etc., we are people of our land first. So for Joleen's case, she is Tongan, or a Tangata Tonga, before she is anything else, before any other label. And that's important to our people. That's important to our peoples across the Pacific, to understand it in our own languages, around its specificity, its application, and how it contributes negatively to our daily lived experiences and realities.
And really good points. And Joleen, sharing what you organized around CEDAW is so important. And for many people, they might not even know what CEDAW is. It rhymes with hee-haw. They might be like, what is that? But it's the UN Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And what you're doing in Tonga is decades ahead of what has even happened in the United States. And Hawaii, due to colonization, is still under the US, and the US hasn't ratified CEDAW. So we've been doing cities for CEDAW to have that. But that's the strength of the UN conventions, is at least it provides that framework to make sure everyone's at the table to have that conversation. And I agree, your points about translation are so crucial, because some of the Western construct of languages does not even comprehend the depth of knowledge in Oceania, that relationship to the land, the relationship between people, where people know what's most important. So we translated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights into Olelo, Hawaii, and just having that process brings everyone greater understanding. So I think you really have the right approach around CEDAW now. And then, of course, it's how to coordinate the campaign and to cut through what maybe people might be saying, which isn't actual truth, or just really using fear to take people down those routes. And so I really thank Phylesha as well. It sounds like you have a great country-specific and then regional approach. And then can you share how you're connected also with the global movement? Because I know if we look at today is actually even historically, it's a crazy point, but in 1895, It was the trial of acclaimed Irish writer Oscar Wilde, and he ended with him being found guilty of committing acts of gross indecency with certain male persons, and he was sentenced to 2 years of hard labor. So this is a struggle, and this is actually happening on this day in 1895. So it's been a long struggle, and we've definitely changed a lot. Can you share with me a bit what the Pacific Island Forum and reaching out to them, and what are we hoping to accomplish through reaching out on the regional level and then also at the global level?
Yeah, I think this is, it's probably worth talking about the problematic aspects of how we ensure there is visibility and voice to the way in which we strategize to working. I think I spoke about earlier the relational aspects are key. Joleen is a key person in the Pacific region who is lobbying in spaces like the Pacific Island Forum and other spaces where not many people would in our communities would have the opportunity to access. And it's very unfortunate that it puts the pressure on one individual to be able to have to advocate for the entire region. The other part at the regional and global level, which becomes problematic, is this is a numbers game. And unfortunately, the Oceania region is basically unimportant to issues globally, because one, the population of our region is minute compared to to countries like India and China, and then where countries are experiencing war and conflict. Again, the Pacific region across issues at the global level, it's really difficult. So when I look across the efforts in the last 20 years and connecting with international platforms, whether it be the Human Rights Social Forum, whether it be whether it be any high political level meeting, whether it be in New York or in Geneva, whether it be through bilateral relationships and what have you not, it's really disheartening to see that there are only one or two people from the region expected to uptake advancing or voicing any part of any issues that we're facing within the region. It becomes difficult. But I mean, again, I just want to highlight Joleen as a legend within our community who has been advancing this work, who has been groundbreaking, not only in the way in which she enters a room, but also the Pacific flavor that she brings to her advocacy, because she walks into the door planting memories in people to never forget about our region. But I mean, I think about the connections that have happened, the work that has been advanced. I'm so thankful that ILGA World, we have our first ever Co-Secretary General, who is at the helm of this largest and oldest LGBTQI organization in the world. And she's from our region. She's from Samoa, Tuisina Imania Brown, who is doing great work alongside a number of us in the region to also advance work, working very closely with the independent expert on SOGI across his thematic reports. It was fantastic and great to have him come to the ILGA World Conference in Aotearoa, New Zealand, to connect with a number of Pacific activists. But then I'm also disheartened in a way that we work in silos, in particular American territories, French territories, British territories, where we're not able to sort of merge our activism to work in collaboration. It becomes very problematic, because what is defining in how we collaborate is resourcing. And if we're doing something in the lower part of Oceania, which involves Tonga, Samoa, Cook Islands, Tuvalu, Fiji, we're bound only to having those very few countries in the region attend. We would like to involve Hawaii, Tahiti within this wider set of work, but it becomes problematic when our funding streams don't allow us to sort of cross over and work through this thing. And I always say this within workspaces, that we come from a part of the world that has 22 Pacific Island countries and territories. I think maybe 25. And if we came together in collaboration and worked in unity beyond these barriers of funding and resourcing, how powerful that would be is 22 representations of a region. I mean, when I think about the UN and voting, China gets one vote. They've got 1 billion people. India gets one vote. But just imagine the power in our region if the combined 22, 25 countries united in advancing, collaboratively in unity to address a number of these things. It would be such a powerful thing for our region. But that's the unfortunate thing, is we're divided by these zoning and territories, and it becomes problematic within the work globally.
It is true. The colonial map still persists and causes many problems. But I'll also never forget two events. One was in San Francisco for Pride with the premiere of the film, and being at that wonderful house there and meeting everyone and seeing the culture come up, and everyone just really appreciating the Pacific voice there in San Francisco. But then also with the independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, for that to be created, the Pacific was a necessary region. And maybe Joleen, you can share about that experience a bit as we move forward, because I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I really want to thank you for coming and sharing, because maybe we can meet again next month for Pride Month and continue the conversation. But there's so much happening in Oceania, and organizing together really is the only way that we can ensure human rights and dignity for all.
The Pride weekend and the premiere in San Francisco was absolutely overwhelming, because it was so good to see all the families, and it was surprising that all these Tongan people, not just families but friends and people we don't even know who they were. As soon as they knew about the movie coming into San Francisco, because one thing that you have to know that, in San Francisco is where all the people from town, from Nuku'alofa, from the city, goes and stay. And, they're all over there. And the majority of my family are there. And we're talking about over 500 people, And not only that, but, the Tongan LGBT community got together to come and support. I got there like today, did the practice of the number of the item that we did in just 2 days, and we performed the next day. And it was absolutely wonderful to see that culture be linked and included in that premiere. And with the independent expert, one of our tasks was really to get, when we were in the Human Rights Council in Geneva, was to ask our capitals, reach out to all the other Pacific Islands, all the other 22 islands, to make sure that they vote for the, for the independent expert position to be able to be accepted and to be in place. And it was quite hard, because we had to actually educate at the same time what independent expert is all about, because it's hard enough doing shadow reports to all those independent superiors, in UN to get our voices through. But having the independent expert to have our voices be heard at the UN, and to be reported directly to him is a milestone that would, and it was hard work. Even though we had to wake up some of our high commissioners in all the countries, in America that are, those who are based in New York and all that. But but we were so glad that actually happened, and it's one of the best things that has ever happened to us, especially in the Pacific.
And I want to add that the Pacific activists were key in those lobbying efforts for the renewal of the mandate. And I was in the room when it was announced, and I had to say the speech to thank the countries that supported the renewal of that mandate, which was just amazing, and it was fantastic. And can I just say quickly, Joshua, I think also one thing that I'd like to highlight in this discussion is films such as Kumuhina Leitis in Waiting, Lady Eva, and Kapai Mahu are really changing the way in which we are dialoguing about these things. They're really bringing our people to the center, to Talanoa, to talk and discuss and to see visually, because our people are visual learners. And, you know, they're just changing the landscape in terms of how people are becoming informed, how people are showing solidarity. It's creating a momentum. So I'm really thankful and appreciative of Joe and Dean and Hinale Moana Wonkalu through this whole showcasing stories from within the Pacific that we don't often see. And I think this is also very important that we need to see more of throughout the region. So no pressure on Dean, Hina, and Joe, but you know there are other stories to be told out there, and many others, and encourage them to continue doing the great work they do, because it supports how we showcase issues, but amazing stories and experiences of people from our communities in the Pacific.
I agree. And I know that we're actually looking for next month at the 47th session, since that's usually the session where SOGI resolutions come up, that we'll be focusing on a side event. Hopefully we can honor Poli and his life's work there. I know I just showed Kapai Mahu as well in my classes and to different council members in Hawaii. And it changed so much. It brought those pohaku that you walk by in Waikiki alive. And I know we have so much more to share. And let's consider this the first of many conversations, and we'll aim for a great, beautiful side event for Pride in the Pacific. Maybe we can call it that for next month. And thank you all for joining us on Cooper Union. Mahalo.